Hey there, welcome to this week's edition of Global Alpha Bulls versus Bears, episode 4. Earnings, tariffs, Fed, the economy was a huge week in markets. Welcome, Richard Nader. How you going, mate? Welcome back.
Thank you. It's been a little minute, but we're
It
back
has
in
been a
action
little minute.
now.
You managed to be away for some of the busiest periods. But it's certainly been a steep learning curve for me, trying to keep up with the US markets as well as everything else. But but basically, for those of you who listen to the daily podcast I do for the morning call, it's been a super busy week. There's been Trump deadlines, have been and gone. There was employment weakness. We had 4 of the Mag 7 earnings come up, and that's just the top 3. Then we also had Federal Reserve as well, so they kept rates on hold this week as well. So it was, albeit a busy week in terms of a lot of announcements. The market didn't really go anywhere. So having a look here.
Is this the weekly heat map, or is this
this is the weekly heat map. So
fairly red then?
Yeah, fairly red overall. I think we'll probably cover, the bit of the earnings of the good, the bad, and the boring for the Mag 7 a little bit later in the pod. But overall, Amazon was the most disappointing. But Meta and Microsoft, I mean, in a bullish week, Meta was up 11% in the aftermarket. Microsoft was on a tear as well after an outstanding result. But and then Apple just standard disappointing. But you can sort of see some of these, like the Walmarts and the Costco's, and some of the defensive areas are actually starting to attract a little bit of attention, just because we've been in that uber growth mode. And we are expecting a little bit of seasonal weakness coming up in over the course of the next couple of months. But overall pretty red, Richie, and not even it could have been a hell of a lot more red had Microsoft and Meta not done particularly well. So one little square to notice down here, United Health down another 15%, and used to be I think it still might be the world's biggest healthcare, well, definitely the biggest healthcare insurer. But they reinstated guidance and then missed their own guidance, which
that sector can't seem to take a break.
Well, Novo Nordisk was down 30% as well. So the GLP-1 drugs starting to wane in terms of demand. So
specifically theirs as well, I was reading. So some of the other companies with that same offering are doing reasonably well, but because they were the first. They're waning in sales and sort of weighing on the stock price, I think.
And that HIMS is doing very well, doing generic versions. Did a bit of a deep dive on that HIMS at some stage. We have put out for clients, a bit of an assessment on HIMS. I had it on the call actually last week, and do quite like the business model, and it really does play into Trump's desire to get all healthcare costs down.
Yeah.
But let's focus on these are the income and net profit flows. So the good was Microsoft and Meta by a long way. They were, and as you can kind of see, Richie, run us through the Microsoft one. It was like I hear it was the first time they've mentioned cloud on their own.
Yeah. So the intelligent cloud, I think it beat by 37% circa.
It was the first time they'd mentioned it. I think it was 37% is what they're expecting growth next quarter.
The next quarter, apologies. But first time that's being covered. I think it's a really good area for them to sort of break some ground on. And we've sort of seen other companies that have let that area of their business slide, reap the bad results of that. And I think Amazon's a good example with their AWS and whatnot.
Yeah, everyone, I think, bought Amazon thinking, Azure did well, Amazon will do better. But Microsoft kind of cut their lunch a little bit. And look, Amazon still beat top and bottom line, but it was down 7.5%, 8% in the aftermarket. And it was a slow grind. Like it was down a couple of percent, and then it just went whack and just got really hit. But I mean, look at these. I mean, look at Meta. There's just that fat revenue in, and you can sort of see with that green, that big fat green line there, that like those net profits are huge, right? Like
Yeah.
and they're doing really well, trying to respond with, they've been a little bit behind with the AI thing, and they're sort of starting to play a bit of catch up. But I mean, they overall had really good results, and that data is becoming more and more important. Just to flag Trump's big beautiful bill, all of the R&D, because they've all got R&D, so in their costs there, all their R&D is going to be covered more by Trump's big beautiful bill. So you would expect that to be smaller, but Microsoft really, it's kind of the Microsoft of old, where they went hard at something early, and getting OpenAI, and they've got something like well over 80% of the Fortune 500 companies now on their infrastructure. So, and they got all the data center stuff, and they've done that deal with Constellation, and they just seem to be ahead of the game, which is, I don't think people have talked about Microsoft like that for 20 years, really. They've sort of just been, you've had to use them, but, and then the boring was Apple.
That's sort of what Microsoft's coming out of, the boring sort of just regular business as usual, no new introductions and things like that. I think that's where Microsoft was a few years ago, whereas now they've broke new ground. And then we look with Apple. There's not really anything new in the business model that we know of. It's just usual sales of the phones and things like that.
Yeah. All they talked about was iPhone. And if you have a look here, one thing I really love about these charts is, see all these services here. Mm-hmm. If iPhones don't sell, that halves as well.
Absolutely.
And
the watch, I'd say, and the AirPods, you don't really have any use for the AirPods without the phone. Like, they tether together. I don't think anyone would own an iPhone and not have the AirPods. And if you don't have an iPhone, chances are you're not going to have a set of AirPods.
Well, exactly right. So, I mean, that one big revenue line affects all of their other revenue lines. So they actually shut down all of their flagship stores in China too, which I thought was pretty interesting as well. But they almost avoided, on the earnings call, they avoided talking about, they talked very briefly about Apple Intelligence, and I actually even ran it through the AIs we use here, and we use a couple, and I actually asked the question, how much do they talk about it? And it basically was minimal. They just continued to talk about iPhone. So yeah, but having said that though, whilst Amazon's net profit is that skinnier green line, it is actually now, I think it's the company that pulls in the most amount of revenue of any company in the world. So, it's albeit at that smaller margin. So just one thing from an economic point, was payrolls was out on Friday, which is the US employment numbers. Was 73,000, and they're expecting 106. However, they've revised the previous months down. So it's the largest 1 month downward revision since March 2021, and the largest 2 month downward revision since COVID. So, and what ended up happening was Trump ended up sacking the Commissioner of Bureau of Labour Statistics. And he's of the opinion that the Fed would have been cutting rates by now if these figures had been done correctly, because he reckons the economy's in slightly worse shape, but we're getting the numbers on a 2 month delay, and effectively they aren't doing their job properly. So yeah, it's not it's one of those things that when the US sort of stalls and employment numbers, they tend to snowball. So yeah, but it's a really busy week overall, and then we haven't even got to Trump stuff. But overall, I wouldn't mind talking just generally about where the next big spend in AI is going to be, because obviously Nvidia's just near on 5 trillion. And obviously Microsoft's doing really well, but I mean, this data center spend, I mean, where are you looking, Richie?
I'm personally looking at the quantum space just for that sort of computing edge that everyone's looking for at the moment, particularly, with the processing needs of these AI models. So, we've got Google talking about their Willow chip and things like that at the moment. And I really think that's going to be, for me, the next, area that's going to propel that space onwards. And a lot of businesses are putting the spend there to try and get on top of that and have that quantum computing ability ready to go virtually.
You're probably better off getting a cut. Maybe I think this would be my we'll get Kai on the podcast next week, and he can talk a little bit more about quantum, because, as we both know, he's the man when it comes to that sort of stuff. But yeah, they reckon IBM is actually pretty close to quantum.
Okay.
They had a disappointing earnings, but I think down about 8%, but had been rallying. Yeah, maybe we'll get Kai on next week to run through that quantum a little bit. I'm looking more towards the almost the mining services sector equivalent of AI, like where you're going to have those data center build outs, which is rapid expansion, etc. And we're obviously going to need a lot of commodities. We're going to need a lot of chips and just peripheral things that don't really wouldn't come to front of mind, to be honest. But yeah, I think that quantum space it feels to me like one of those ones where, if you get it right, fantastic. But it's still, the tech's a little bit further away than what everyone thinks. And stuff like small modular reactors. I did a bit of a deep dive into that the other day. Oklo's one that we were looking at. And there's been some pretty smart deals done there, but there's a number of companies that are in that space as well, particularly based in the US, where they can get that funding a lot easier. So yeah, but apart from that, really, the secondary stories were just Trump posturing a fair bit, making a lot of threats. He did we moved 2 nuclear subs towards Russia, made a few threats to Russia over the weekend. I believe that was more to distract the fact that no one's done a trade deal yet. He re-announced the UK trade deal, even though that's been done for a while. Still hasn't come to terms with India, etc. So yeah, if you want to, if you want to get more detail on the specific picks, you'll have to subscribe and then we come into the members section for our for the paid version of the podcast. I'm doing a free morning call every morning as well, which you can get on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, or YouTube as well. Just go to the website to subscribe. So Rich, we'll flick over to the members podcast.
Perfect. Thanks, guys.
Thanks. General advice warning. The content presented in this presentation is intended for informational purposes only and provides general advice only. It does not take into account your personal objectives, financial situation, or specific needs. This information should not be the sole resource when making investment decisions. We strongly recommend you seek the advice of a financial professional.